The story opens with, in the year 447, there was a huge war around the world between the 6 heroes and the Demon Lord. The Demon Lord's army of skeletons rushes into the battlefield to face the heroes, but the heroes have been blessed with godly powers and now have angel forms. The Demon Lord Leonis was sitting in his room chamber watching everything from his ball. All his strongholds have been defeated and this is their last line of defense. The skeletons manage to clap some human soldiers, but one of the heroes has the power to bring them back to life. Suddenly a huge tree-like creature appears, making the Demon Lord angry because he recognizes it as the Art-Sage hero who quit being human get more power. Leonis gets up and summons his staff to join the fight, but his Fenrir companion of loyal general stops him, reminding Leonis that he made a promise to the goddess of rebellion. She had entrusted him to do something when he was still human, so Leonis decided to accept defeat. He drops his staff and walks toward a door while his castle is being destroyed before entering. He promised that he would rise again in 1,000 years and reclaim his throne, and so he sealed his own soul in the Grand Mausoleum. 1,000 years later, we then see 2 girls exploring the castle ruins of Leonis. Roselia and Regina are on a mission to scout the ruins because they have reports that some monsters called voids are building their nests there. They walk through a corridor and reach a huge door. Roselia recognizes it as the King's Mausoleum where Demon Lord Kings decide to rest, waiting for their final days. Regina tries to open it, but thinks they need to pick up something to blow it apart. Roselia then notices some writings on the door and uses her phone, which language it is. She realizes the door is alive and touches it. Suddenly the door activates and opens up. She picks up her gun and steps inside where she finds a huge crystal. She then realizes there's a person inside and decides to help him. We then see Leonis in a barren place. He sees Roselia, the god he once made a promise to. He says that he finally has found her and she replies that it's been over 1,000 years since they met. Leonis explains he couldn't do anything against the god powers given to the heroes, so he decided to seal his soul to keep his promise to her. She replies that she's happy that he still remembers it and walks away into the air. Leonis tries to stop her, but she simply says she hopes to meet him again. Meanwhile, Roselia is trying to shoot the crystal to rescue Leonis, who's the person inside. He complains about the noise and wonders if it's been 1,000 years already. He guesses the reincarnation ritual was successful. Leonis then notices Roselia trying to shoot the crystal. He realizes she's human and thinks she's trying to rob his grave, so he decides to show her the power of the reincarnated Demon Lord. He uses his magic to shatter the crystal and knock her down. He initially thinks she's a descendant of the High Elf tribe, but he's wrong. He then decides to finish her by trying to rob his grave, but he stops when she asks why a kid would be locked inside the crystal. He looks at his reflections and is shocked to see his new form. He thinks the reincarnation spell failed, but he doesn't understand why because he used the spell to rebuild his body to a previous form he expected to be in his Demon Lord form, but he is now in his human form when he was still a hero. Yes, the Demon Lord is a former hero. The girl asks him why he was sealed inside the crystal and checks him out to make sure he's not hurt. She then suddenly hugs him, telling him that Big Sister is there to protect him. He initially gets annoyed but eventually ends up falling fainting. He later wakes up and she gives him some cookies. He thinks that his current body is bad because he fainted from something trivial like hunger, but luckily Roselia saved him. She then asks if he's fine introducing herself as a 15-year-old student from the Holy Swordsman Rearing Institute and asks for his name. Leonis introduces himself and thinks he can use her to get information about the current world. She repeats his name sometimes and calls it cute. He gets annoyed because his name once meant chaos and terror, but now a random girl calls it cute. He then realizes that his record as the Demon Lord was deleted from history. She asks for his age and he replies that he's 10. She then asks if he remembers the void monsters that had taken him away, but he's confused. She then explains that voids are enemies from another world and that she and her school colleagues are knights who wield swords to fight them off. Leonis is initially confused because 1,000 years ago the enemies of the world were people like him, Demon Lord and the Goddess of Rebellion. Roselia then explains she and Regina were investigating these ruins because they suspect it's a void base. He realizes that she found him by coincidence, but she said that the door was sealed until she touched it. He then asks her what year it is. She says they're in year 64, which confuses him. He suddenly hears a big explosion and Roselia receives a message from Regina stating she encountered large voids. Roselia immediately holds onto Leonis, stating she will protect him. An ogre void comes through the door and Roselia tries to shoot it down. He gets all annoyed they're destroying his Grand Mausoleum and decides to use his magic to stop it, just to trip and fall flat on his face. She tells him to back down and shoots the void, but it only tickles him. Suddenly, a laser beam destroys the void's arm and shoots its body down. It's Regina and her huge cannon. The void gets up and Regina changes her cannon form to shoot it in the chest. Despite being surprised to see Leonis, Regina simply tells Roselia to take away and escape while she holds the void down. The two run away and Leonis thinks nothing went according to his plan. His reincarnation spell failed and he reverted to his human form before he became a demon lord. His grand mausoleum is now infested by aliens who are destroying everything. He wants to deal with them, but he can't because the girls are there, and if he shows his power, he won't be able to use Roselia to get more information about the world. Roselia then says they're about to reach the surface, but a crystal suddenly collapses on the ground and turns into a wyvern void. This is nothing like the wyverns he's used to. Roselia tells Leonis to run away while she deals with the monster. Her gun then turns into a sword and she prepares to deal with it, but Leonis simply ignores it and starts casting his spell to destroy the monster. Roselia for some reason pushes Leonis away, telling him to run and gets sliced in the gut. She lays on the floor in a pool of her blood and Leonis wonders why she did it. She says her last words, telling him to run and escape with Regina, but Leonis gets closer to her. The wyvern gets closer and the second void appears. She apologizes for not protecting him and closes her eyes. Leonis holds her hand until her last breath, but thinks she's an idiot. They only kept her to gain more information, but she decided to sacrifice herself to protect him. In fact, he could have used his power to easily block the wyvern's weak attack. He wanted more information, but he didn't think she had value to him anymore. However, she reminded him of Rosalia when she protected him, revealing that when Leonis was the hero, he was betrayed by the people he tried to save. That's why he became the Demon Lord. More voids appear and try to attack him, but his magic barrier manages to block it all. He thinks it's annoying to have his human form because he regained his emotions. The voids continue to unleash attacks, all parried away. He then turns around and summons his staff. He tells the voids that he grew attached to Rosalia's courage and decides to punish the voids for disturbing his castle. He casts a level 8 gravity spell, smashing a void with the pressure. Another void tries to attack, but he simply blocks it with his barrier and modifies it to attack the spikes. The last void starts flying away to escape, but he simply jumps and casts another level 8 fire spell to ferry it down. However, there was something he didn't expect. The void's bones remained after using the spell, something that never happened even against dragons. He thinks it's because his current mono levels are a third of what they used to. He then notices Roselia is just barely alive. He normally wouldn't care about human lives because he's the Demon Lord, but he still acknowledges her because she tried to protect him. He cannot use holy spells to heal her, but he can use all spells related to death. So he decides to use his power to give her life. He uses a spell that restores all her lost blood into her body, healing her wounds. Meanwhile, Regina manages to finish off the ogre void and tries to contact Roselia, who's still unconscious. Leonis hears it and finds it impressive that humanity's technology managed to advance that much. Roselia then finally wakes up and immediately hugs him, relieved he's safe. She then checks her wounds and doesn't know how she's fully healed. She's confused because she's sure she died. Leonis then explains he used his holy magic to heal her back, but she doesn't know what magic is. He then realizes Roselia and Regina didn't use spells to fight the voids, but they used their weapons, which was made out of advanced magic. He realizes that in the current age people can't use magic, so they use magic weapons that require no training or hard work. Still confused, Roselia asks if he used the power of a holy sword, but he doesn't understand. She explains that some holy swords have healing powers in the Excalibur Academy. She believes he can use that power and believes that's why he was abducted by a void. She then gives a whole explanation of what is holy swords, basically their powers awakened by mankind to fight voids 60 years ago. Humanity almost lost the war against the voids, but children awaken the holy sword power to manipulate fire, wind, and others. He realizes that this power is different from the one he uses, so he decides to hide it from everyone. Regina then arrives and the girls ask what happened to the void. Leonis lies, saying it disappeared while he was shaking in fear. They then decided to leave the ruins and Roselia asks Leonis to join her on her bike, which confuses him. He joins her and they drive back to the academy while Regina keeps teasing Leonis. After a long drive, Leonis has finally a view of the city and he realizes that it's the 7th Assault Garden. Things continue as they all journey to the surface. Regina and Roselia reminisce the day Roselia's parents died. On that unfortunate day, the entire mobile fortress was attacked, and all the young ones and people who couldn't fight had to go into hiding. They hid in a secured shelter, but they could still hear the noises of the battle, the sounds of the bombs, and the effect of the battle. At a point their light goes off and suddenly comes back. It isn't a surprise that the young kids are scared to comfort each other. They speak about irrelevant things and eventually they fall asleep. The next day, when the battle ends, the door to the shelter opens and they see light again. They come out of their shelter to a destroyed city. Almost all the nobles who had engaged in their battle and fought died in the battle. Thinking about her parents, Rosilia bends to the ground and starts crying immediately. Regina tries to console her as they both think of what next life has for them. At present they drive Leonis to the 7th mobile fortress. Leonis sees the building from afar and asks them if that is where they are going. They explain to them how important the fortress is to them and how they protect the place. Indeed, Rosilia declares that it is the place they are protecting and she would do anything to protect the fortress. She is no longer ready to deny her identity and her duties. They eventually arrive at the fortress, which is really bigger than Leonis had expected. It is really more than that. He calls the place an island, but they correct him that their fortress is a mega float. It isn't really on the ground and they are trying to push it toward the ocean to attack the void from behind and eventually win the fight. As they have this conversation, Rosilia receives a call talking about how she has sent the information about the kid to the government. Leonis had healed her when she was almost dead, and even if she didn't take him, she was already under his administration. Leonis is entirely lost in the conversation. He doesn't understand what they are saying and what they mean, so he asks them to explain better. They narrate to him that they think he is one of the lost children from Void's invasion and they are sure his family must have been searching for him, so they will find his home for him. Rosilia tells him that before he finds a home he can join the academy. As she tries to explain how the academy works to him, Regina excuses herself and asks to go to the market and get everything they need. Regina walks away from them and Rosilia informs Leonis that before he can join the academy, there are some processes that he must follow, so he has to stay in that place for some tests. The tests are standard procedures that all new members who visit them go through, and the academy is a place where young kids who are given great powers by the gods to defeat voids are trained in exchange for fighting and protecting the city. The academy would give them all a new life. Following her concise explanation, she asks him to enter the building and she will meet him later at the gate. She immediately zooms off with her bike and he enters the building. He is bothered by a lot of things. Sincerely, things weren't going as planned before he went into deep sleep about 1,000 years ago. Humans have advanced a lot. There have been several civilizations and growths. They now have other enemies they are fighting against, which are the voids, and even if he is ready to fight them, does he think he can do well considering that he looks like a kid? To survive in that environment he needs to do more. He decides to call his maid from his former world and his best friend. He calls out for Sherry and Blackas, who are seeing him for the first time in about 1,000 years. They immediately hearken to the voice of their master and they greet him. They claim they had also been in deep sleep all these years and they are really glad to see him, but Blackas asks him what is the deal about his new body. He is forced to explain that his reincarnation had failed and to return to the shape he was when he was still human. He recalls that the reason Blackas wouldn't know how he looked when he was a human hero was because he met Blackas after he had become a demon lord. While Blackas is indifferent about his new look, Sherry comments that he really looks cute and the new figure fits him. She immediately sees that he doesn't like the statement and she apologizes immediately. He calls them lowly beings and says that he has come to ask them for a favor. He has a mission for them and they are up and ready to do whatever he wants. Looking around, they have also seen that humans have changed. They aren't the same and civilized people that they left about 1,000 years ago, and Leonis admits that things have changed in such a way that he needs more information before he can make a move. He asks them to help him gather all the information they can gather around and for them to find out everything humans have been doing in anticipation of the return of the Demon Lord. Well, it seems humans haven't been doing much since they don't even know anything about the Demon Lord. He pleads with his servants to be very careful and warns them not to use any device that could expose them. Since humans are very much on their feet and they don't want to be caught, Sherry wonders what Leonis' next course of action will be and if he will follow them back to their hidden place, but he claims he isn't going. He is on a human body and the body has needs. He needs clothing, food, and shelter, and the best way for him to get it is to pitch with humans. He informs them that he will be staying at the academy along with the people who had reached him, so he can use that opportunity also to find more about humans and learn their newest culture. He dismisses them and they promise to take their mission seriously. After they leave, he enters the institution for his test. The first door he passes through takes into a room with long pipes around. He wonders what the room is for and what the pipes are doing there, but suddenly liquids from the pipe pour on him and wash him. However, when he enters the door, the lights increase and red light starts showing. The loud noise also comes out from the system and he is very sacred. Luckily, the light is turned off as it should and the noise stops. He leaves the door and proceeds to the next one, with no expectation of what more he will meet. However, it's the end of the process as he receives his identity card in front of that door. He looks at the plastic card, but Roselia comes behind and takes it from him. She explains the card would serve as proof of his identity until he is accepted fully by the administration. However, she has to take a record of the card so she can have a concise record for her submission. She takes a picture of the card and returns it to him. As they return to her bike, she feels a little weak and she says that she needs to rest at home before returning to the administration for her training. She reveals to him that she hasn't awakened her power and she wants to keep fighting and training until she can awake her powers. He wonders what rationale that gods could use in sharing such power if someone is courageous, as Roselia hadn't awakened her power. Regardless, she offers to take him around the environment so he can at least see the Excalibur Academy before he follows her to her dormitory. They ride around the city and he sees the happy people around. He recalls that the city is meant to be fighting a war and he can explain why there are so many happy people everywhere. He asks her why the city looks so peaceful, and she explains to him that only the experienced warriors are taken to the battlefield. The mobile fortresses are secured, and they ensure that voids do not attack them, which is why everyone there is peaceful. She eventually reaches Excalibur Academy. The building is so huge and it is really big. She shows him the administration and tells him that Excalibur Academy is the central military body of the entire city and that is where all their direct commands come from. He doesn't give the kind of expression she is expecting. She expects him to be very shocked at how huge the building is, and she also tells him that everyone who sees the building for the first time is always very excited. However, what he is thinking about is much different. He wonders how to infiltrate a building like that without losing the battle. She takes him on a tour inside the building and shows him his class where he would receive all his lectures, the library with several books, the dance hall and even the bathhouse. While he could understand why they had a training room and a library, he didn't understand why a school would have a dance hall. Well, all work no play would make them tell students. She responds in the same way and acknowledges that there is a need for them to have fun. When they are tired, they start walking to the door. She shows him the girls' dormitories and he also notices that all the ladies who pass beside them give great comments about how he looks. This makes Roselia tell him he would be popular. Their fun trip soon turns sour when Roselia meets a senior she dislikes. The senior had always been flirting with her and on that day he asked her what she is doing with the child and asks if her weak platoon is now babysitting children. He reminds her that if she doesn't awaken her power soon she will be sent away from the school. So he advises that she join his platoon to become his play toy and secure her space in the school. She refuses his offer and tries to walk away but he gets triggered and drags her hair. This makes Leonis angry. He uses his power to terrify the guy and he bows to Leonis's feet. The senior refuses to give up, so he brings out his weapon but another senior step in to remind him the use of their regime isn't allowed in the school and he is also trespassing by visiting the female dorm. He walks away embarrassingly and Roselia appreciates the female senior. The lady proceeds to ask about Roselia's mission and apologizes for not following her. She takes Leonis's measurement for his uniform and Roselia feels weak again. Celia rests on the tree for a while and continues to tour later. They eventually get to Celia's dorm. The dorm looks much older than the other dorms Leonis has seen on his way, so she explains to him that the school is based on merit and you can only get great rooms if you are one of the most intelligent in the school. She stops by Regina's room but Regina is asleep and she takes Leonis to her room. She asks Leonis to have his bath. As he does that, she asks him if he would like to join her platoon. Her platoon is weak because she doesn't have power, but she needs to seal her stay in the school. She enters the bathroom to meet him naked and he is nervous. She feels she is just a big sister to him, so she even offers to help him wash his hair with shampoo. He reluctantly accepts and as she does so, she informs him that with his healing power, every platoon will be all over him. She claims she won't be angry if he doesn't join her, and she would like them to remain friends. However, he actually intends to join her. He fears that he would only be at the mercy of other people if she is faced with danger and asks her why she really wants to be in that school when she knows she doesn't have power. In her defense, she claims she wants to be able to protect herself. Suddenly, she faints. Leonis drags her closer and puts her mouth in his vein. He reveals to her that he has lied. He tells her he doesn't healing powers and only has dark powers. He tells her the real her has died in ruins. Elsewhere, Sherry and Blackus split up to quickly find information. Things continue. Roselia wakes up on her bed confused about what happened. Leonis explains that she collapsed due to lack of mana and he had to give her some of his. She doesn't understand what he's trying to say and asks about Leonis' real identity. He simply says that he's an ancient sorcerer who resurrected from the crystal and that he uses powers that have been already forgotten. He also shares that his sorcery can only control death and he can't really heal or revive her. Since he cannot use holy sorcery, he could only save her by raising her as an undead. She asks if he cannot use the holy sword power. Leonis reveals he used the level 10 spell named Create Elder on death. To be fair, he wasn't even sure the spell would work. However, she came back as the strongest of all undead minions, the Vampire Queen. She gets worried about being a vampire, but Leonis explains that she lacked mana, so she had to drink some of his blood new to her vampiric impulses. She believes his story and he apologizes for not being able to properly save her. She asks if she can share her story and Leonis agrees to listen. She tells him what happened 6 years ago, how she lost her city to avoid attack along with her parents. She says that her parents were both holy sword users who tried their best to protect the city. However, she feels sad because she had to be in a shelter with Regina. Since then she's been training to awaken the holy sword and fight voids. She then asks him if she can still manifest the holy sword, but he doesn't know about it. He simply tells her that she's now a lot stronger because of her vampire queen nature. She's still a bit worried, but the mood changes when Leonis' stomach makes some noise. She laughs it off and mentions that he has already spent more time in a girl's room when compared to eating. They head to the cafeteria where she asks if she can still eat normal food because she's now a vampire. Leonis replies she can because she's a high-ranking one. She will recover mana from eating, but it takes too much time, so it's not the most efficient way to regain her strength. She asks if he has decided what he wants to order. He asks for bread because he doesn't know most of the dishes. She tells him that he must have a balanced diet, but he dismisses it, mentioning undead don't need it. This strikes her down and he realizes that she's not used to the fact that she has become an undead. He apologizes to her and ends up following her suggestion. He then mentions that he has money and pulls out a gold coin. Deep down he's bragging to himself about how rich a demon lord is. Roselia asks him what he is and he tries to explain himself as a rich guy who can buy the whole restaurant. Turns out that he's a broke dude. Roselia explains real gold or money is useless in today's age because everything is bought with credits that hits him like a brick. They then heard a girl talking to two guys in the background, the guys complaining that she isn't wearing the school's uniform and tries to take advantage of the situation. When one of them grabs her, she quickly knocks them down with her wooden sword. The girl then tells them off, stating she has permission to dress like that, and the guys start running. Roselia quickly runs to the girl and calls her Sakuya. She asks what happened and Sakuya explains everything. She was supposed to be in a tactical drill, but Sakuya snuck out because it was boring and decided to gamble until she got caught by those two guys. She then focuses on Leonis, explaining that Elfine already mentioned him. Silly keeps her version stating he was abducted by voids and she saved him. Sakuya then introduces herself and shakes his hand. He quickly notices that she's someone who dedicated her whole life to the sword and wonders how much she has trained. Roselia then reveals Sakuya is her platoon's vanguard attacker and ends up paying for everyone's lunch. While eating, Leonis asks Sakuya why she's dressed like that. Sakuya explains that's the traditional clothing of her homeland and a memento of her sister. Her village was attacked and destroyed by voids and she was the only survivor, so now she's training to get stronger and get her revenge. Leonis apologizes for asking about such circumstances and Sakuya explains that usually people must wear the Academy's attire, but since it's a memento from her sister, she somehow got special permission to wear it. After the meal, Roselia and Leonis head to the training grounds to register his holy sword. There he meets Alto, the instructor in charge of his examination. She explains she will examine him to determine what type of holy sword he has. He then summons his demon lord staff and Alto questions his abilities. Leonis simply says he's a support who can do all sorts of stuff based on the situation. He then notices some robots around and asks about them. Roselia explains those robots are void simulators. In short, they can copy void combat patterns. Alt tells Leonis to fight it since it's set to the low level. He thinks a level 2 gravity spell should be enough to finish this quickly, but that ends up destroying all the robots. Roselia and Alto cannot believe it. Alto questions how he crushed the robot and asks if his holy sword is really a support type. She wants to know more about it, then everyone around starts looking at him. She then starts programming the void simulator to a higher level, but they are interrupted by the annoying Muzel. He wants to handle the examination. Leonis says he doesn't mind, but he also mocks Muzel by saying he's on the same level as the robots. The guy gets so enraged that he ends up calling his holy sword Harry Potter wand. His pet girls also call up air weapons, but Silly claims that 5-on-1 isn't fair, but Muzel simply claims that his holy sword has the ability to control others as his weapon. Yet Leonis arrogantly says he will just defeat the 5 nubs. Resilia decides to join and help him falling into Muzel's plan, because he will allow her to help Leonis under one condition. If she loses, she will join his platoon and become his toy. Leonis knows that Muzel simply wants to clap Resilia and decides to take advantage of it. He accepts the condition, but if Muzel loses, he must never bother Resilia again. As you know, the guy is so dumb that he ends up being overconfident and accepts. Leonis tells her that he won't allow anyone to touch his girl, and Resilia starts blushing. Resilia then asks Alto for a training sword, the holy sword replica made for training. After setting up their positions, they decided to start. Resilia quickly dashes forward and knocks one of the girls down. She then goes for Muzel, but another girl comes to block it. Leonis simply watches, thinking that her raw attributes improve since she became a vampire queen. One of the other girls smashes her weapon to the ground, forcing Resilia to parry the pebbles. Muzel, being the typical loser, tells one of his pets to deal with Leonis while Resilia is distracted. The girl rushes forward and attacks with lightning, but Leonis simply uses a low-level spell to block it with his shadow, and then he uses it to restrain the girl. Resilia then starts getting the advantage against the 2 girls she's fighting against. The third comes forward, but Resilia takes her down. Resilia then decides to deal with Muzel, but he simply uses his wand to stop her from moving. She's a bit confused about what's happening, but he explains this is his real power, the Holy Sword of Dominion. He knocks the sword out of her hands and explains all the dirty things he will do to her later, but first, he decides to deal with Leonis, who's a big corner. He's still restraining the first girl, but the other 3 got up and are surrounding him. For now, with Muzel, Leonis thinks he could use a level 2 spell and wipe them out in an instant, but he suddenly hears Resilia. She's talking to herself, mentioning how much she wants to protect him. She then begs her holy sword to appear. Her strong desire makes a bright light appear on her hands. The light then transforms into a holy sword. Regina, who is watching, could not believe her eyes. With her holy sword, Resilia manages to break free from the restraints. Muzel is clearly your loser who cannot believe what's happening. Giving Resilia the chance to rush forward, she destroys his wand in half, releasing all the girls in his control without any other option. He gives up like the little loser he is. Everyone starts cheering for Resilia, including Regina, who immediately hugs her. She's so happy that she managed to awaken her power, and Resilia can barely believe she managed to do it. Later, she thanks Leonis for helping her, but he dismisses it, explaining she did it because of her duty. She's a bit confused, but he simply replies that her duty is to protect her master. She doesn't understand what. She laughs it off and promises to protect him. She pats him and decides to ask him for a favor. She wants him to make her stronger and asks him to join her platoon. He quickly accepts the deal. They throw a welcoming party where Regina cooks a huge feast. But this party is also to celebrate Resilia's holy sword awakening. Elfine and Sakuya congratulate her, and they mention his performance during the examination. They quickly talk about whether Resilia already named her holy sword, but she dismisses it. Elfine and then tells Leonis to come to her room so she can analyze his skills, and that drives the real conversation to begin. There are no more open rooms in their doors, so Leonis will have to stay with someone. Regina quickly jumps into the conversation. She wants that clap session. She even promises to make him sweets every day. Sakuya also wants a piece of that despite being out most of the day. Elfine joins, stating she has tons of plots in her room. Leonis has so many options, but Resilia jumps in between. She considers herself his guardian, therefore she will make sure he's cozy at night. The girls suspect something, but Leonis mentions he'd rather stay with Resilia, not because the winter is cold, but because that will allow the 2 of them to keep their secrets, especially because she will need to get mana from his blood. As promised, Leonis goes to Elfine's room to be examined. She uses her holy sword Eye of the Witch to scan his data. Leonis is impressed about it, but she says that she can use it for now. He is confused, but she explains that she lost her holy sword powers and her capabilities are now limited. She reveals she was part of the 7th platoon, which used to be the strongest group, with her as their main attacker. They would usually go on void extermination missions until 6 months ago. They were investigating some ruins and were attacked by voids. By the time they realized it was a trap, it was too late. The group fell apart and she was the only survivor. She then lost most of her power and shut herself in her room, but Resilia visited her so much that she accepted to join the platoon. She then finishes scanning his biological data and finds something interesting. It says that Leonis enjoys staring at plot. She tells him that being naughty isn't good. He then notices a map on her monitor and asks if he can check it. She agrees and gives him a tablet with the map. While checking it, Leonis notices the void distribution area over the last few months. He then calls forth Blackus and finds out from him that the voids have similar characteristics to the monsters the Dark Lords used against mankind. He then orders Blackus to investigate the spots presented on the map. Blackus disappears and Sherry suddenly appears. She also has a report. She found out something about humanity. They learned how to make donuts. Leonis tasted and finds it delicious. Sherry starts pulling more food from her bag and he understands that she's only been eating for the whole time. He gets a bit annoyed, but she explains that she also got some information people don't know about any demon lord. They don't even know about ancient gods or the war between the Dark Lords and the 6 heroes from 1,000 years ago. He asks her to continue her investigation. Sherry then mentions that Roselia became Leonis' minion. He wonders why she sounds so upset, but she just ignores him while calling him a dummy. He gets annoyed mentioning Roselia is a vampire queen who can use the mysterious holy sword power. She will be their first step to reform his demon lord's army. She gets angry and says she hates him while disappearing. Meanwhile, there's a group of divers investigating the underwater ruins. They find a huge tree with a face. The tree starts calling Leonis' name and attacks the divers. That brings the episode to an end. Thanks for watching. Want next part? Subscribe the channel and turn on notification bell.